Let me share the story of the $200 miracle seed that relates to your opportunity that is coming up. This also relates to each of the 7 workshops that I am going to be teaching in early 2011. This is so exciting. In July 1999, I left Culpeper Hospital after working there full-time for 12 years. A year and a half later, I committed my life to Jesus and began to faithfully spend an hour per day reading the Bible and praying. In April 2001, about 4 months after I committed my life to Christ, I went to the annual Fellowship of Christian Athletes banquet in Fredericksburg, Virginia. The keynote speaker was someone who started as a quarterback in a Super Bowl. He shared the story of how his son was murdered during a drug deal in a car. This speaker loved the Lord and had an altar call at the end. Even though this event was at a Holiday Inn, about 100 people went forward to invite Jesus into their hearts. This blew me away. I had never seen something like this before. I don't remember if I donated anything to the FCA at that time, but God planted a seed in my heart. Before leaving the banquet, I told Cynthia Rahal, the director for the Greater Fredericksburg Area FCA, that this event had planted good seed in good soil. While I didn't know when or how I would get involved, I expected to eventually. Then in the summer of 2001, I met with the 2 leaders for the Culpeper FCA on the football field. When I asked how I could get involved and volunteer, they invited me to the very first FCA huddle of the new school year. So I went to that, and it happened to be on the second Wednesday in September 2001. The school clubs normally met on the first Wednesday of each month, but for some reason they moved this one to the second Wednesday, which just happened to be the day after 9/11. This was my very first FCA huddle. As I walked into the school gym, I saw my daughter walking over to the FCA area. Surprised, she said, "Dad, what are you doing here?" I told her I had come to help with the FCA club. I was quite surprised to see my daughter here because when I invited her to join the FCA a few months earlier, she politely declined, saying she was already part of the DECA club and students were allowed to belong to only one club. Well, for the very first time in the 10-year history of the FCA at Culpeper High School, the group of students formed a prayer circle in the center of the gym and prayed out loud. There were about 30 students who showed up for the FCA, and all the high school students who were not yet assigned to clubs were sitting in the bleachers. I was pleasantly shocked to witness more than 10 different students praying out loud in front of their peers in a high school gym in a public high school. After the FCA huddle meeting was over, I spoke to the student president and vice president, offering to help in any way I could. They told me they wanted to attend a makeup leadership training session in Fredericksburg in a week or 2 and asked if I would drive them if the 2 current FCA leaders declined. As things turned out, I did end up taking these 2 FCA student leaders to the makeup leadership training session in Fredericksburg. And it was during that training that I received an extensive orientation to the FCA Bible. Cynthia Rahal, who was overseeing about 30 schools in the Greater Fredericksburg region, led the training. About 7 to 10 student leaders from other schools were there. Cynthia gave each of us an FCA Bible and passionately shared how to use that to change lives. It was from the FCA Bible that I learned the importance of a daily quiet time and also the value in journaling. By the way, my daughter ended up committing her life to Jesus about 2 weeks after my first FCA huddle and was rapidly transformed from being a selfish teenager into a very unselfish young lady. At Christmas time later that year, my parents described this as a miracle. I was so grateful for my FCA Bible that I donated money to buy a box of 72 Bibles to make sure all the FCA students at Culpeper High School could have one. I intended for that to be an anonymous donation. However, Cynthia Rahal was so grateful that she came to the next FCA huddle at Culpeper High School in October 2001. During that meeting, Cynthia told the students I had bought the Bibles for them. When one of the star football players asked me to sign his Bible, I asked him why and shared that I was just an ordinary person like him. He persisted, so I wrote the prayer of Jabez in his Bible. Incidentally, I think the Culpeper High School football team won the state championship that year. Clearly, God was at work big time. A month later, in mid to late November of 2001, I happened to review my goals for the upcoming year on a Sunday morning and decided to do anesthesia part-time because my mother said I was so good at that and so compassionate. Later that morning, our family went to the Sunday worship service and then to the China Jade for lunch. My fortune cookie happened to say, "An unexpected event will bring you riches." Do you know God can speak through fortune cookies? The next morning, a Monday, I spent 2.5 hours in quiet time. Normally I was spending about an hour at that season of my life. My wife asked why I was spending so much time there and when I was going to start working. I told her that God multiplies our time when we give it to Him with a cheerful heart. Whenever we give God our best, He will multiply that. After my 2.5 hours of quiet time, I came to my desk in my office. Holy Spirit prompted me to write a check for $200 to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes to buy more Bibles for leaders, not even in my own community. After I wrote that check, I picked up the phone to make a call and discovered a voice message from John, an anesthesiologist I had met only one time previously, and that was 4 years earlier. We had never stayed in touch. When I called John, he asked if I was willing to substitute for him 6 weeks a year, 5 days a week, for a total of 30 days per year. He assured me that he had taken care of some of the problems at that hospital I had heard about. I was thinking to myself, how am I going to get in a discussion about pay with John? Then Holy Spirit told me, just listen. As I was listening to John share more, all of a sudden he said, "Joseph, I don't know how much you plan to get paid, but I was planning to pay you $1,200 per day." It turned out this was exactly $200 more per day than my highest paying anesthesia assignment ever before. And in my entire lifetime, I had written less than 5 checks for $200. So God multiplied my $200 seed 30-fold in 15 minutes. That was amazing. God always blesses His word. Over the next 5 years, while I was doing anesthesia, God multiplied my $200 seed more than 250 times. That's because everywhere I went, I was paid more. And that $200 seed ultimately led to the $14,400 miracle seed story that I'm going to share about momentarily.